Okay, I'll talk now. So, my wooden cobra is back. Um, because I'm going to be talking about King Cobra, King Nefertari Cobra, or King Nefertari D Cobra, the late. Give or take how you want to interpret that. So the Cobra is back. It's going to go over here. And the cube is back. To represent the poneglyphs. So, um, this video for the rulers and royals and leaders and whatever else you want to go with for how I'm defining the series in One Piece is going to be about Alabasta rulers. It's the second one. This one is going to be about current events and King Cobra. So stuff that is much more current in regards to things that we are aware of in the story, and then specifically over the life and death of Cobra. Two things I wanted to point out. A, I am talking about Cobra during Father's Day week. That did not line up that way on purpose. It just happened. And it's like coincidentally, it's very appropriate. I mean, Monday or Sunday was the Bleach Father's Day thing that I did, and this one is talking about Cobra. And then I'm actually wearing an Iron Man shirt. And I thought of a comparison that I wanted to throw in here in regards to Cobra and Iron Man. And spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen Endgame, which by now, if you haven't seen Endgame, you're either not going to, or you don't care, or whatever, or you've heard it anyway. In Endgame, of course, Tony sacrifices himself and everything, and Cobra's final act was sacrificing himself in order to allow Sabo more time to escape from the Gorosei. So, there's a comparison there. They both kind of sacrifice themselves to a degree in order to allow their child, in Tony's case it's Morgan, in Cobra's case it's Vivi, to allow their child a chance to have a better hope for the future. To hopefully be able to have a better future than what, in the case of, with Tony, it's what Thanos was going to offer. And in the case of, Cobra, it's, a better future for the world in general, with hopefully Vivi being able to be a part of that. So there's that. I just wanted to point that out. So, again, basic information. Of course, this is about the Kingdom of Alabasta, which was, of course, established on Sandy Island in the Grand Line in the New World. In the Grand Line in the Paradise Half. And it is a summer island. It is also just an entire giant thing of desert with little bits of oases all over it. A few things that I did want to point out that I kind of mentioned in the previous video where I talked about Lily. This one, currently kind of the information that we have about the kingdom is, of course, technically, I guess they're still considering Cobra the current king of Alabasta, but by a technicality, given the fact that he's dead, and with most monarchies, generally, once the king or the queen of the bloodline has died, or the current holder of the bloodline has died, that is the ruler, then their heir is kind of automatically proclaimed the new king or queen or empress or emperor or whatever you want to go with, sultan, whatever. Their heir is generally, then that is now their position and everything. We saw this, I've mentioned this with I mentioned stuff about Queen Victoria and Queen Elizabeth in my Lily video, but in this case it is rather applicable given the fact that, as soon as Queen Elizabeth died, Charles was considered king, even though the coronation only happened last month. He had still been king that whole time. Side note, for a lot of royals, before kind of that came into action, or it was just as soon as the king or queen dies, their heir is now the ruler. It was, they had to go through this whole other additional thing before they were now the new king or queen. And they just determined that that was a very inefficient way of doing things, because it just meant that, like, for like a certain amount of time, they technically didn't have like a head of state, depending on how you want to put it. So they just kind of made it that, like, oh, as soon as the current ruler dies, their heir is now the new king, queen, head of state, however you want to put it. And that seems to be possibly what is going on in Alabasta right now, but I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end of the video, and then when I talk about in Vivi's video. So Cobra is the king. And other important people in Alabasta are, of course, Vivi, of course, is the princess. We also have Shaka and Pell, who are the head guards. As I mentioned, of course, in the previous video about Lily, they represent the current forms of the jackal and the falcon that are two very prominent deities in regards to protectors of Alabasta. So we have that. We also have Igaram, who is the royal guard captain. And then, of course, Koza is also kind of like an important person at Alabasta at the moment. He was the rebel leader, and I will be going over parts of what happened during the revolution and everything in Alabasta with the Revolutionary Army there with Koza. I will go over that in a little bit. But he also is, I think, also considered the Minister of the Environment at the moment, which, I mean, clearly Cobra didn't hold anything against Koza in regards to what happened. And I'm assuming they've probably seen each other since then, considering that Vivi was, has been around, and she's probably had the ability to actually like reconnect with Koza, but I'll go over that a little bit more later. Current affiliations, they are affiliated with the Straw Hats, and by a technicality, they are still technically connected to the world government. Although there is the current question of like, okay, well, who's in charge of Alabasta at the moment, considering the fact that Cobra is dead and Vivi cannot be found, and Igaram, Shaka, and Pell are all currently at Marijois, or all currently waiting in like the port at the Red Port, trying to find out what happened with Vivi or whatever. So we don't really have that many other named characters. There's Koza, there's Terracotta, who is Igaram's wife, who is like the head chef, and she's apparently a very good chef because Sanji was impressed. There's also Toto, who is Koza's father. But there's not really too many other ones that are like majorly important main characters. Also in regards to the royal guards, they also just have like the elite royal guards in general that they show up at one point in time to try to fight Crocodile, and I think they just get kind of one-shotted pretty easily by Robin, I think. And then there is also the supersonic spotted duck-billed squadron. Which of course has Karu and all of the other ones that I went over much more in the video where I talked about different animal allies for the Straw Hats. So we have them there. Also, we don't know where Karu is. He was on the ship on the way to Reverie, so we saw him there, and he was in the courtyard when stuff was happening at Reverie, because he was there when Vivi met Leo and Rebecca and Shirahoshi. Karu was there. So we don't know who Karu is. Maybe he tried to follow Vivi. Maybe he's with someone else at the moment. I don't know. Maybe they captured Karu. We're not sure. We'll find out. We do know that Alabasta, of course, has a poneglyph, and I'll be talking about that a little bit later on. And it does have, I believe it was stated at one point in time, either by specifically in the story or in a Viva card, it has a population of about 10 million people, which, given the fact of like when that information was given, that's probably changed a little bit, given the fact that, there's probably been some more people that have been born and have died in Alabasta since that number was given. So around 10 million people, which is pretty dang good size. There's lots of, we know there's different port cities and stuff like that. And then we know there's other like oasis cities and towns. And then there's rain denners and Alubarna and everything throughout Alabasta. So we know that there's lots of different towns and everything, and cities and villages. And the cities, like, Rain Base was pretty dang good. It was pretty big, and Alubarna is pretty big as well. So there's those. I went over, of course, that the symbol of Alabasta that is on their flag is, of course, what appears to be a symbol of a sun, which I made the comment that might be a recognition in regard to what was written in Vivi's letter, and it's like a hidden message in that regard. I kind of pointed that out a lot more in the Lily video. It does have, as I mentioned, it does have a poneglyph. It is located in the Tomb of the Kings. This poneglyph was either probably brought to Alabasta either sometime shortly before or after Lily's death, and probably her brother may have been the ones who actually placed it within the Tomb of the Kings. And then just like with the letter that was given to him from Lily, it has been passed down, knowledge of it has been passed down throughout the course of the Nefertari line. And, eventually it ended, of course, where it's, Cobra was aware of it. I'm assuming since everything that happened in Alabasta, I'm assuming Cobra has probably told Vivi about the poneglyph. Crocodile found out about the poneglyph one way or another, so I'm quite certain that Vivi learned about it as well, that, Cobra took her to it and showed it to her. Maybe they dug it out after, like, the Tomb of Kings was been, collapsed and everything during Luffy's fight with Cobra and such, or Luffy's fight with Crocodile, excuse me. We know that the poneglyph that is in Alabasta is the one that states where Pluton is, and that it states that Pluton is located within and or under Wano. So we know about that. We don't think that Cobra has the ability to read the poneglyphs, but it could just be that, like, when the poneglyph was brought to them by whoever was able to deliver it to them, because somehow the poneglyph had to have gotten to Alabasta some way or another. And it was probably told to whoever the king was at the time, probably Lily's brother, in all honesty, that what is written on this poneglyph is the location of Pluton, is information about the ancient weapon Pluton, and your sister, gave her life in order for us to try to bring this here to you, so please keep it safe. It doesn't necessarily mean that they know exactly that the exact location. Like, they may know that it holds information about Pluton, like the past kings and queens of Alabasta may have known that it holds information about Pluton, but they may not know that it states that, oh, Pluton is located on Wano, in the New World, and it's located, like, under Wano or something like that. Like, they may not know exactly what it says. They just like, well, some people eventually will be able to read this and you'll just have to wait and talk to them, type of thing. So they pass that information down. So there's some of that stuff, which I'll go over a little, probably touch on again when I get to some of that stuff with Cobra. So some things I did want to point out is we don't have a huge amount of information as to stuff that happened in Alabasta between the end of the Void Century, beyond the fact of, like, Lily's younger brother was made king, and he is the direct line that that Cobra and Vivi are most likely descendant from. So there's that. I did want to point out that very recently, at the beginning of Egghead Island, or right when they're getting on their way to Egghead Island, leaving Wano, getting to Egghead, there is a moment where they're reading in the newspaper about the fact that Vivi has gone missing, and that they find out that Cobra is dead, where the Straw Hats are getting this information because they had not been aware of this information since they've been on Wano for the last, like, 2 weeks or so. 2-3 weeks or so, because of the fire festival and dealing with Kaido and everything, and then resting, and Luffy and Zoro coming out of their battle comas, and such, and they they're getting this information about stuff. And what ends up happening is Brook actually knows about the Alabasta Kingdom. He's like, oh, Alabasta, yeah, I remember them. They have, they've been very good rulers of their people. He knew about them, and he knew that they were usually a very merciful country, a very good country. That he's never heard of there being misrule within Alabasta. And, Brook was, that was 52 years ago at the earliest, given the fact of, like, when Brook would have been in the Grand Line and everything. And note that was before Cobra was born, because Cobra is 50. And Brook was, of course, within, 2 years, so Brook was, of course, within the, Florian Triangle for 50 years plus the 2 years for the time skip, so that's 52 years. And Brook, would have had that information before he ended up there. and before he ended up in the Florian Triangle, and they would have sailed through the Grand Line. So Brooke may have heard about Alabasta. Brooke may have, all honesty, Brooke and Yorkie and the rest of the Rumball Pirates, they may have been to Alabasta and seen, what Alabasta was like 50 years ago. And even if they say that, like, Brooke's like, well, I've never heard of, misrule in Alabasta, and all the time that I've been, a pirate and everything, I've never heard of them having a bad king or queen, so that says something. That means that would have been either Cobra's father or grandfather that would have been the king, or, father, parent or grandparent that would have been the king or queen at the time. Because we don't know exactly when Cobra became king. We know he was at least king, I believe, 25 years ago, and everything happened with Gold Roger when he died. But we don't know exactly when he became king. So I wanted to point that out. Now much more into Cobra himself. So Nefertari Cobra, or Nefertari D Cobra, is the 12th king of the Alabasta Kingdom. He's the 12th ruler of them, the 12th head of the family. And we do not know exactly how many generations that goes back to, like, where that lands for, like, Lily and her brother, where they land in that mix. They may have been some of the first, or they may have been a little bit down the line. It all depends on, like, how long lived the rulers of Alabasta have been during that time frame. He is, of course, the late monarch, patriarch of the Nefertari family. His wife was Nefertari Titi. Now, a lot of people point out that Lily, of course, or that Vivi, of course, looks pretty much exactly like her mother in some of the other animation that we've seen of her, which is perfectly understandable. But a lot of people also point out that, like, Lily looks, Vivi looks like Lily from the silhouette we got, and the fact of, Emu thinks that Lily and Vivi are very similar, most likely. And I'm like, okay, the answer to this is most likely at some point in time, because a lot of the times in royal families, it is quite common for, kings and queens to have multiple children. It is exceedingly possible that, Lily's brother way back may have had several children and married them into different, very well-to-do families within Alabasta at the time. And then eventually some of those children ended up marrying back, descendants down, married back into the royal line, as in Lily, Titi may have been able to trace her ancestry back to, one of the former kings of Alabasta as well. And that's why she looks like Lily, because there's still that connection there, because she just happens to have those same genetics. And that's why Vivi looks like Lily. So there's that, which is not surprising in the slightest. I mean, a lot of royal families do tend to marry their own second, third, fourth cousins. Much less now than they used to, but that was quite a prominent thing that used to happen. And it is, of course, revealed very, very recently in the last several chapters that that Cobra has secretly bore the initial of D throughout his life, even though he did not know it. So in regard to, of course, references for Cobra's name, of course, it is obviously a reference to, the king cobra, the Egyptian cobra, or asp, or serpent, or viper, or snake, or however you want to put it. A lot of the times within Egyptian, sarcophagus and sarcophagi and things like that, and the hieroglyphs and pictures and everything, there is usually like a snake that is depicted on the crown of the pharaoh, and you see this very clearly on the funeral mask for King Tut, that there is like two little snakes on top of it, and those are, I'm going to mispronounce this, I apologize, Uraeus. It literally just means like a rearing cobra, and it's a representation of sovereignty, royalty, deity, divine authority in ancient Egypt. So it's like Cobra's name is like a double reference to that and everything. Also, Nefertiti is, of course, based on Nefertiti Merimut, who is the wife of Pharaoh Ramses the Great. There's a very famous bust of her that was found in regards to her being considered very beautiful. So as I mentioned, in regards to Cobra, he is 50 years old, or he was 50 years old at death. One of the comments that we do have about Cobra from Dragon, which states a lot about Cobra in and of himself, is that King Cobra of Alabasta was known far and wide as a noble ruler, a man of great character. Which, the fact that that's being said by Dragon, who is very much this, wants to take down the celestial dragons and everything, and he definitely would know about the connection between the Nefertari family and the celestial dragons and all of that. The fact that he's saying that means that he very much respects Cobra and Vivi and the Nefertari family, and probably is well aware of, Robin stayed with them for, 2 years. She was with the Revolutionary Army, and she probably told them how much Vivi and Cobra fought to try to protect their people when Crocodile was doing everything, and that probably influenced some of how Dragon thought of Cobra and Vivi. He may not have had a huge impression of them to begin with, but based on that information that Robin probably gave him, he was able to figure out, okay, these are ones that we probably would want to have as allies, or these are good kings, and these would be good kings and rulers to be able to stay in power after we take down the world government, after we take down the celestial dragon. So there's probably that. In regards to Cobra's personality, he is a very fair man. He very much wants to take care of his people, and he tried to do what he could to try to stop the rebellion as much as he could. We know between Crocodile and Mr. 2 interfering with that didn't help. He does not think that, as a testament to his character, the loyalty that he has to the monarchy, or the loyalty that the people seem to have to the monarchy, he also very much reveres his citizens. He wants them to be safe, and he cares for their survival and their well-being far ahead of his own. We see Vivi demonstrate the same concept, whereas lots of rulers and royals and stuff like that throughout history in our world, and probably throughout the history in the One Piece world, have very much been more on the side of oh, I get my own, and those around me that have my favor, they get what they want, but if you're a peasant, I really don't care what happens to you as long as I have food on my table and nice clothes for me and my family to wear. Alabasta doesn't seem like that type of a country. We see what both Cobra and Vivi go through in order to try to protect their kingdom from Crocodile. And while Cobra may not have been able to physically stand up to Crocodile as much as he may have been able to in his younger days or something like that, or much as even Vivi did with trying to attack Crocodile at various points in time, he still was trying to do everything that he could to try to stop this revolution and try to protect his kingdom and his daughter. He chose to show Crocodile where the poneglyph was because it would stop Crocodile from hurting Vivi. Still resulted in Crocodile dropping Vivi off the side of the castle, but she was fine. She was caught by Luffy. We know that he adores his daughter. Adores Vivi. He thinks she's just the best thing in the world. But he treasures her, but we also see that he also does not raise her to think that she is above everyone. He wants her to be humble and to have as much of a normal childhood as possible, which is why he lets her go and play with Koza and the Sunasuna clan and all of that. He does not like it when another child hits her, but Vivi stands up for herself, and he doesn't like it and Igaram doesn't like it either when he sees Vivi get hurt. We see this several times. Both of them are very protective of Vivi, and so is Pell, and so is Chaka, and along with the other ones that are part of the castle, the guards and the Duck Squadron and Karu and everything. So we see a lot of that throughout that. He also does have a thing that is called the King Chop, which is just, I think, just like him, it's not as amazing as King Elizabella II's King Punch, but it's still pretty damn, it's still something, I guess. In regards to his history, as I said, he was born 50 years ago. And we don't really know too much about that. We know that during the golden age of pirates, that after the execution of Goldie Roger, we see in one of the flashbacks, we see Cobra and TT and Igaram sitting there and reading the newspaper about what had happened in Logtown and everything for the execution. And as stated before, TT looks almost exactly like Lily, and at this point in time, Cobra was probably already king, or very soon would be becoming king. Kind of the big next incidents that we kind of get, or the next moments that we kind of get, are stuff with flashbacks that we get with Vivi when she's in her childhood. Stuff mostly where we see her interacting with Koza, but we also see other stuff where Koza and Toto, who is his father, like they come to the palace and they try to ask for assistance for certain things, and Cobra tries to do what he can, and I think Vivi and Koza end up getting into a fight, and then later on, she of course goes out and she goes to try to join the Suna clan, and we see Cobra and Igaram both like wearing like the head scarves, trying to like hide who they are. See them there trying, watching as Vivi's interacting with Koza and the Suna clan, and she's made like the co-leader of it with Koza and everything. And like they're so proud of her and everything, and then Vivi gets abducted. A bunch of bandits show up and like they recognize Vivi as the princess, and like they attack a bunch of the children. And yes, Igaram and Cobra are very concerned that the other children got attacked as well, but they're like, they took Vivi and Koza and like they went that way, and like they go after them after they get the kids' help, and like they go after them, and Koza tried to protect Vivi, and that's why one of the reasons that Koza has so much of Cobra's respect, why Cobra respects Koza so much. And sometime after that, as a thank you, Koza then has Toto and Cobra sends Toto and Koza out to go to see, to set up the village of Yuba. Which is, I think they found like this new place that has like a new spring and water and everything, and they want to set up a village there, and that's where they go. And it's, he does it out of great respect for them and trusts them with this and everything. And that's kind of, as far as we're aware, the last interaction at that point in time that like Cobra and Koza have for quite a while. Next incident that we know is about is, of course, the incident at Reverie 8 years ago. Where Cobra and Wapol end up having their big argument because Wapol is dismissive of what's going on with Dragon, and Cobra thinks that they do need to think of Dragon as a threat, which at that point in time, admittedly and honestly and understandably, Cobra thought that Dragon was this big threat, that he wanted to just overthrow everything, that it wasn't just specific aspects of it. Also, this would have been, a good chunk of time after this Revolutionary Army was probably, a good 10 years after it was probably formed, but probably also just like a little bit of like, well, they're still not quite 100% able to explain what they want. So Cobra, he gets angry at Wapol, and then after the meeting, Wapol ends up, slapping Vivi. And of course, Cobra is not happy about this by any means, but Vivi, of course, because she doesn't want to cause any type of a war between Alabasta and Drum, which, in all honesty, Alabasta would probably wipe Drum Island off the map pretty damn quickly, in all honesty, because I don't think we ever get the exact amount of population on Drum Island or in the Drum Kingdom, but probably not nearly as much and not as much military might as what Alabasta has, so probably wouldn't last too long. But, Vivi doesn't want to cause that type of a situation to occur, so she just doesn't act like she's upset, and she apologizes. And then as soon as Wapol's walked away because he's angry, she starts crying because it did her, because she got punched or she got slapped by him. And Cobra, of course, did not like that. Then we move, of course, into much more current events, or much more current times in regards to where we are at the beginning of the story, or where we first start interacting with Vivi and Cobra. So 3 years after that, there's this huge drought that starts just to spread throughout the kingdom. We find out that this is, of course, being caused by Baroque works by Crocodile, with him using his Suna no Mi to go and make, droughts happen and cause villages to get destroyed and stuff like that. And of course, he starts importing rain powder so that way they can make it look like Cobra is, trying to take rain from other places and just only bring it to the capital or to other areas. And during this time frame, Vivi and Igaram, I think it's about 2 years before the start of the story, Vivi and Igaram decide that they need to infiltrate Baroqueworks. Now, this is also implied that at some point in time, Crocodile did set himself up as, the Shinigami. That was wrong. Shishibukai. After he became a warlord, he went and he set himself up in, rain dinners and made rain base and everything like that, or however you want to go back and forth on those two names. I don't remember which is the casino and which is the town. I'm sorry. Set that up and everything, and he developed the plan of like kind of copying a little bit what happened with Doflamingo in Dressrosa, where he's just like, oh, well, I'm going to manipulate the people enough to the point where they see me as the savior and Cobra as the one that is actually the problem. And yes, Cobra is a very, very smart individual. Crocodile is a very, very smart individual. So his plan probably would have worked had the Straw Hats not shown up, in all honesty. But of course, we know that Vivi and Igaram head off and they infiltrate Baroqueworks and everything as, I think he's Mr. 8 and she's Miss Wednesday, I know that, but I think he's Mr. 8 or something. And they head there, and then of course part of, Whiskey Peak and everything. And during that time frame, Cobra doesn't exactly know. He knows that she left, and he knows that she's off to infiltrate Baroqueworks and everything, but they don't really have a whole lot of an ability to contact each other. Later on, of course, we know that during this time frame is also when Koza starts to build up his revolution there, his revolutionary army there. We know that eventually, once the Alabasta saga starts, once we get to that, that Cobra, he is grateful to Crocodile for what he's been doing, because he doesn't know that Crocodile is the one that's in charge of Baroqueworks and everything, but he's of course thanking him for defeating the pirates that tried to raid Nanohana and everything. And then eventually he is given a letter by Vivi that reveals revealing that Crocodile is the one that's causing all of these problems. And one of the other things I believe is, of course, during this time frame, they keep having it that, Mr. Four and Miss Merry Christmas actually end up like kidnapping Cobra. And then, of course, Mr. Two Bon Clay, of course, ends up, copying Cobra's face, and he can go and, pretend to be Cobra. And, so he keeps causing problems in that regard. They see him at, bringing in rain powder and doing all this other stuff and being a town to be destroyed and like all this other stuff that like the real Cobra would never do. And of course, because he looks exactly like Cobra and, they have the guards dressed up in the correct, stuff and everything, they think that it is Cobra. And the rest of them are just like, the rest of the people at the castle are like, where's the real Cobra? And so we see a bunch of that stuff happening. And eventually, of course, we know that when Vivi arrives at the castle, at Alabasta Palace, that she is, of course, she's confronted by Crocodile there later on, when he shows up. And I'll go over much more about Vivi, of course, in the next video when I talk about Vivi, of course. But they get to the castle, or they get to the palace, and of course, Crocodile has Cobra hostage, and I think at one point, he has him like pinned to the wall with what look like giant spikes through his shoulder, going right through his elbows, which does not seem healthy by any means. Does not seem like the best idea, but has him pinned there. Which Cobra's already like kind of beaten up a bit, so he's probably been a bit maybe tried to fight against Mr. Four and Miss Merry Christmas and stuff, and that just didn't go very well for them. Later on, Cobra is there while Crocodile, is threatening Vivi, and he's like, fine, I will take you to where the poneglyph is, just please don't hurt my daughter. And then, like, Robin takes Cobra away, and then that's when Crocodile drops Vivi, and Luffy, of course, shows up and saves her and everything. And Crocodile and Cobra, Cobra leads Crocodile and Robin down to where the poneglyph is, And, Robin then, of course, makes up the history and everything about, what's written on the poneglyph and everything, makes it up. And, lies to Crocodile about it. And then, of course, when Crocodile and Luffy are fighting, during that time frame, Cobra ends up asking Robin why she lied. It's like, you can read it. I know you can. Crocodile said you could, so why didn't you tell him where Pluton is? Which, again, we know that Cobra knows that the thing talks about where to find Pluton, but he doesn't know that it says exactly what it says where Pluton exactly is. Like, as I stated, he knows that it states where Pluton is, but he doesn't know that he does not know the phrasing of, like, it says that Pluton is located in Wano. That type of a thing. And Robin ends up, she's like, well, I don't want Crocodile to have that type of information because it's not a good idea for him to have it. It's not safe with him, and he's just going to use it to cause more problems. And Robin and Cobra actually end up having like a bit of a conversation because, Crocodile shows up and he like stabs Robin and poisons her and everything. When she tries to defy him and escape, he stabs her. Which, Robin, you've been in so many different instances about probably being stabbed in the back by different people that you've worked for where you've stabbed them in the back. You think you would have been a little bit better prepared for this than just one little vial of water to mess with Crocodile. But like, she gets hurt, and Robin and Cobra end up actually having a conversation where he's, they start talking about the fact that, yeah, you can read the poneglyphs and everything. And Robin is just like, well, yeah, I can. And I want to find out about like the true history. I don't remember exactly if during this time frame, if she kind of tells Cobra some of what she knows, or if he tells her some of what he knows. Like, I highly doubt he told her what was in the letter from Lily. I highly doubt that topic came up. But we see them talking. I don't remember if we get the exact whole amount of the dialogue that is there, but we do see them talking. And of course, during that time is when Luffy defeats Cobra, and of course, this is when the whole big battle is happening in and out, inside and on the outskirts of Alabasta with, all the royal guards and the royal army and everything fighting against Koza and the revolutionary army and everything, and Vivi and the Straw Hats and doing everything that they can to try to stop it and everything, and like getting the bomb defused, and of course Pell flying the bomb out of there and it just blowing up, and somehow Pell survived. I'm still of the mind of like, I would be okay if Pell survived if they explained that he was able to get high enough, toss the bomb, and then fly away fast enough that it didn't fall back down. It blew up before it got too close to him again, and he was fine that way. Maybe a little bit knocked out by like the concussive shockwave, but more people have talked about how to deal with Pell in the past. Some people just straight up ignore that he even exists anymore. Which, take it or leave it, whatever. But we know that during that time frame, Robin explains that she actually has like the antidote to the venom, and of course they end up seeing Luffy defeat Crocodile, and Robin gives Cobra the medicine to both for herself and for Luffy. And Cobra ends up, of course, he carries Luffy out of the tomb of the kings that's now been destroyed. And takes him back up into the streets of Alabasta, and that's where, of course, he finds Nami and the others there, and Vivi, and they're like, he's like, hey, is this your captain? And they're like, yes, thank you for bringing him back to us, we're sorry he's an idiot. And then they come back to the castle and everything, and they stay there, and of course they have like the big fun meal and everything. That I actually just like that meal because it's kind of fun. And yeah, even the 4Kids version of the meal is kind of fun to watch, with like all of them having fun, and like Cobra just like enjoying himself and everything. He's got his daughter back. Igaram is alive. Igaram's fine in that regard. And so we see a lot of that stuff. And then of course He's also fine with like Nami wanting to look through the books that are in the library and take some with her. She may still have some of those books. We don't know. We also see, of course, then there's, of course, the whole bath scene that happens where he brings them into the royal baths and everything after they've recovered from their injuries. And, you know, he, of course, looks over the wall along with the rest of the boys and sees Nami and Vivi, and Nami does the happiness punch and everything. And then, of course, Cobra does this very heartfelt thank you to the Straw Hats and everything for helping Vivi and for bringing her back to him and for, you know, helping save his country. But he's thanking them as a father, not as a king. He's like, so much like, I'm so grateful I'm so grateful to you for bringing my daughter back to me safe and sound. And that is my thanks to you as a father who loves his daughter. There's also the layers in there, you know, this is a thank you of a king who you helped my country and everything. And even amongst the different people in Alabasta, as far as we've seen, most of them, yes, they know that like Vivi and Cobra are their king and their princess, and, you know, Titi when she was alive and everything. But it's not like Vivi was like sheltered within the palace or anything like that. You know, we saw that with her out with the Sunasuna clan and the other cases. You know, she wasn't afraid to get down and dirty and help the Straw Hats fight as much as she could. She, you know, and Cobra was probably the same way. Maybe he wasn't raised the exact same way, but, you know, he was probably still raised to respect his people and to put their own safety above even his own, which, in my opinion, is a much better way of being a ruler, you know. Although what is also pointed out is that, yeah, who is currently in charge of Alabasta? We know that the next morning, in regards to everything after that happened in the bath and everything, that Cobra, you know, goes and talks to Vivi, and he's even like, if you want to go with them, if you want to go with the Straw Hats, I'm not going to stop you. And, you know, if that's what you want, that's what you want. I will stay here and I will take care of the kingdom, and you go with your friends. And we, of course, know that Vivi, of course, stays in Alabasta. She stays because, like, she didn't really abandon her people for those 2 years, but she was not there. She was doing what she could to help them in her own way, but still. And, you know, so she wants to, of course, stay in Alabasta, and, you know, Cobra is very proud of her for that. There's also one of the things that they do point out in stuff is that she goes from calling him Papa, she calls him Father from now on, and that's what she, I think, just continues to call him, as like Father. I don't remember if that specifically stuck in the English dub or not, but she in the Japanese it's much more obvious, I guess. Moving on ahead, we don't really have too much else. We get some bits here and there for like some of the cover stories and other information, where we get some touchbacks on stuff. We know that during the post-Ennis Lobby arc, we know that Cobra and Nigurem and Shaka and Pella are very surprised to see that Robin is now a member of the Straw Hats. That is now fully common knowledge and everything, and that's they were very worried that Vivi was going to be very angry, but she's like, no, I'm not surprised by it at all, and it's fine. If Luffy trusts her, then that's fine, which is going to result in a very interesting conversation between, like, when Vivi gets back with the Straw Hats, what's that conversation going to be like between her and Robin? I don't think Vivi holds any ill will against Robin anymore, given the fact that she's seen that Luffy and the others have forgiven her for what happened in Alabasta, or for her being part of Baroque Works. And Robin might be able to have like a good conversation with Vivi where she explains certain things to her about what happened and why she was working for Crocodile in the first place. But, you know, there could be some instances there. Some interesting conversations. Also, there's like the cover page story where, like, we know that, like, I think it's Vivi. I think Cobra goes to the hot spring as well. Like, they go to the hot spring that, like, Yaratsu and Koza's uncle like find and build, and like they go there. I think Vivi I know goes. I think Cobra goes too, but don't quote. I'm not sure on that one. We know that during the Summit War, that like Vivi and Cobra probably, if that was broadcast in Alabasta, they were probably watching what happened with Luffy fighting his way to get to Ace and the Whitebeard pirates and everything with the Marines and all of that. She probably was watching that. If they were able to, visually show that, either at least for themselves, if not all over Alabasta at the same time. Because, Vivi met Ace and Cobra was there, probably watching it with her and everything. We also see that, like, during the war that, after the war was over, after the Summit War was over, that Cobra was informed by Shaka and Pell that a group of pirates had been driven out of the country without much damage and everything. And Cobra's happy about that, but he's also, he wishes that all pirates in the world could be much more like the Straw Hats. And like he's very concerned about the article about like reading about Luffy and the 3D2Y. He probably saw that, and Vivi and the others probably figured out, Vivi probably figured that out pretty quickly, just like the rest of the Straw Hats did. Moving more into post-time skip, of course, during the, Decks of the World, we see Cobra bedridden when, we get like the updates there where Vivi goes back to the castle and everything after being out among the people. She goes and, Cobra is bedridden and he's reading the newspaper and everything. And she's just, Vivi brings him flowers. And then during the Whole Cake Island saga into stuff that happens with Reverie, of course, we see Cobra and Vivi and the others departing Alabasta. They, I believe, are escorted by Hina to the Reverie. And we see them, we don't see them arrive at the Reverie, but we do see them, of course, in the courtyard. And we also know that Cobra has spent the last 2 years, despite his declining health, doing as much research as he could about the world government and about the poneglyphs and everything like that he got, because he was, I'm assuming, inspired by stuff that he talked about with Robin. And he also doesn't like seeing Vivi when she's up on top of the mast. When she's up there, like, arms out, I'm king of the world moment for Vivi, on top of the crow's nest. And he even is like, come back here, it's time to talk about suitors and everything, which I pointed this out in, I think, my video like last year or the year before, where I talked about Cobra and TT as a couple, that TT, yes, may have come from another very high-ranking noble or royal family with possible connections back to, Lily as well. But she, Cobra and her most likely married for love. It probably was not an arranged marriage. And while Cobra does seem to be the very doting father, and he probably would have loved to be able to, walk or like wheel down the aisle with, that was probably another moment where Cobra would have, like, for Vivi's wedding, if he got to be there for Vivi's wedding, like, he would walk her down the aisle. He would get up out of his wheelchair and walk his daughter down the aisle with his head held high, is most likely what would have happened had that been able to, actually take place. That he would have done that would have been another moment where he would have been like, screw it, I don't care what this wheelchair is, I am going to stand up and I am going to walk my daughter down this aisle. I am going to walk this aisle down my daughter. No, I'm going to walk my daughter down this aisle. And to the man that I am going to trust to help protect her, and that she will help protect for the rest of her life, and will be like the next king consort or whatever of my country. Cobra probably would have done that. In all honesty, that would not have surprised me in the slightest or whatever. But he's trying to convince her to find a suitor. And then, of course, during the Reverie arc, we have it that him and Rikudol III, the king of Dressrosa, of course, along with Fujitora, they stood up and they made the case to have the warlord system abolished, and they succeeded in that regard. They were able to have that become true, have that become what happened, law, where the Shishi Bukai, where the warlords were. abolished, and so everything happens there. And then of course we have it that Cobra goes and talks with the Gorosei, and he goes in on his own. And leading up to what we actually see with this, for as the audience and everything, we very recently just got this flashback where we got this information a few chapters previously. We got a little bit more information where we kind of had already thought that was okay. Well, something happened to a Sabo and Vivi and Cobra reverie. And for a good chunk of time, we all figured Cobra died. Cobra died at Reverie. That did not surprise anybody in the slightest. That is what has happened. Cobra is dead. Probably Sabo got blamed for it. Because that didn't seem like something Sabo would have done in and of his own volition of trying to kill Cobra. But this video is much longer than I anticipated it being. Sorry, I'll try to speed it up. But we know that Cobra goes and he talks to the Gorosei, and he's, telling them about, asking them stuff about Nefertari Vivi, or Nefertari Lily, and the Void Century, and the 20 founders, and, the Will of D and everything. And he's asking them about that. And then, of course, Im just shows up. Walks up the thing and sits on the throne, and Cobra's just like, well, this isn't going to end well for me. I can already tell that's not going to go well. And we, of course, know that, Cobra, tells him about the letter that has been passed down through the royal family. We see him, kind of have to interact with Im, and Imu asking him different questions and all of that. And, we know that this, of course, results in them basically making the decision of, Cobra's going to die. And, this is when Sabo shows up and he tries to protect Cobra, and, weird amorphous blob shadow things for the Gorosei. And then, of course, Sabo, grabs Cobra and tries to run and tries to escape. And they both get hurt by Im, or by whichever other member of the Gorosei stabbed them with what looks like a devil tail. And Cobra, in his last moments, he stands up and he's like yelling at, Sabo to run, to go. And he also yells at Sabo, carry on, this is what was in the letter from Vivi, or from Lily. This is what happened. Tell Luffy and tell Vivi that we also bear the will of D, just like he does, that we bear this, and tell them, and just go and do what you have to do. And I'm assuming that, Cobra had a very, very fast 180 in regards to what he thought about the Revolutionary Army, because we know that, as I said, 2 reveries previously, 8 years ago, he thought that Cobra, or that Dragon, was a big threat. And then as soon as Sabo shows up and saves him, he's like, well, I thought that you would have something against me as well. And Sabo's like, no, our main beef is with the 5 old guys over there. And now the thing's sitting on the throne that we didn't know existed until about 30 seconds ago, type of thing. And, and all of that happens. And Cobra stands there, and he, kind of acts as, probably not a very good barrier, but enough of a barrier that, Sabo is able to escape. He acts as enough of a deterrent that Sabo is able to escape. And we know that there was a picture taken of Sabo standing over Cobra's bloody body that resulted in, of course, that was the picture that was disseminated all over the world by Morgans, in the economic, World Times, World Journal, whatever you want to call it. And it led to, of course, that legacy that is kind of somewhat unintentional, but is also Cobra would probably be okay with his death being used as fodder for these other revolutions to start happening in these other countries, and to help the Revolutionary Army, because he probably went through a very quick 180, because he 8 years ago I thought that Cobra kind of didn't like us, and then now this guy who's his chief of staff just saved my life and has a connection to Luffy because he's Luffy's brother and all of that. And you're yeah, Luffy saved my kingdom once, and he's okay, all of that happens. So Cobra does that. Cobra is now unfortunately dead. Sabo, I guess, to a degree carries on his will, and to a degree so does Vivi, of course, and to a degree the Straw Hats as well, because, the six original ones, Luffy, Zoro, Sanji, Usopp, Nami, and Chopper, and Robin all interacted with Cobra to some degree. And, Chopper and Usopp were both very upset about Cobra's death because they thought that he was a very kind and a very great king. And Luffy was even upset about it as well. Not as angry as he was about the fact that, like, Vivi was missing and he wanted to go and help find her. But Luffy still wasn't happy about the fact that Cobra was dead. And I'm pretty sure most of the rest of the Straw Hats that knew about them, that had met them, as I said, the original ones, weren't happy about it. I mean, like, Zoro's not the most emotional person in the world, but I don't think he was happy that, like, one of the nice kings they met that happened to be their friend's dad is dead. I'm pretty sure Zoro was probably at least a bit of, like, bring me sake, we're gonna have a toast to this guy. That may have been something Zoro would have done. Bring me sake, this man deserves a toast. Also, I just want sake. That type of a thing. So Cobra's kind of his legacy, his will, his, whatever you want to call it, will live on. Sabo will hopefully eventually be able to find Vivi and meet up with her and Luffy and give them this information so Vivi can know. Vivi will hopefully be able to find out about this connection that technically her and her family have to Luffy and the Will of D and all of this. Also, that connects her to Blackbeard as well, but, she just never really met Blackbeard. Pretty much every interaction, any indication or any moment that Vivi has had that would have involved Blackbeard has all been bad. She's had a good interaction with Ace because of, him showing up at Alabasta and meeting Luffy there. And then, of course, good interaction with Luffy. And then now she's finding out that she herself is a D, or will hopefully find that out. We also do not know if Vivi has been given a bunch of this information by Cobra, so find out about that later. If anything, she can get, like, this information from Sabo about the letter, and then she can find out about the poneglyph from Robin. So it's not like she can't find out about that information. But that'll be helping carry on her father's will. So video ended up being longer than I wanted it to be. Sorry, but that's what I got here. So I thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I probably missed a couple of things here and there about Cobra, and I apologize, but, if you think of what they are or whatever, and if it's a question, I might see about trying to answer it in the comments. So that's what I have. I thank you for watching, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye!